Welcome back to the Pick Up the Flow show. I'm Selwa, and today my guest is Ruth Saxelby. Hi, Ruth.
Hey, Selwa.
How are you?
Really good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for being here. So the tradition of this podcast, of this show, is to let the guests introduce themselves. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm a writer and an editor with a background in writing about music, sometimes with a journalist hat on, sometimes more as a critic, and sometimes more in my original mode of blogging. And I'm just circling around those things still.
Nice. So where are you from originally?
I'm from the UK. I grew up in Leicestershire, which is in the middle of the country, in the East Midlands. Originally actually next door to Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire, which are there's lots of shires in the middle of England, quite rural areas, lots of small towns and villages. So I was in a village originally and then graduated to a little town when I was 7.
Oh, wow. And so could you share with us some of your memories, from back in the days?
Yes. So my mum and dad they decided to become vegetarian when I was born. So we grew up living in a big old farmhouse that my mum and dad rented along with some of their friends. Mm-hmm. So it was like growing up around lots of adults, kind of like soft communies kind of style, just everybody cooking a big meal and lots of pots on the table and, spooning everything out and having a big veggie meal together. So, we had chickens. It was pretty idyllic. Yeah, really fun.
Wow, nice. And were you listening to music at the time? What was your relationship to music?
Well, my mum and dad, my mum and dad were very into Joni Mitchell, Eurythmics, Pretenders. So all of that music was kind of coming through to me at the beginning. My mum always used to sing The Circle Game to me when I was a baby, so that was really on a loop. That kind of music originally I was really into. Also the Roaches, which are a trio from New Jersey, 3 sisters. They have a song called the Hammond Song, and actually I think that was my first introduction to an electric sound, because there's Robert Fripp is on the record. He produced the record actually, and he also does some of his electric guitar fripperies on Hammond's song. And there's a moment when Susie Roach's voice kind of melts into this electric guitar, and I'm kind of been thinking about that as my first introduction to this electric sound, which kind of set me alight.
So so later on you went to London, right?
Yeah, so first of all, so I grew up, we moved to a town called Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire when I was 7, because the farmer that owned the farmhouse wanted to sell the land, and so we kind of got chucked out. So they moved to Melton Mowbray, which is a small town, and it was very much a farming town. It was there was a cattle market, and people used to come and sell their fruits and etc. Cheeses. It was big for cheese, big for pork pies was the local speciality. And there I kind of really got into dance music. That's really where my introduction to dance music was, going clubbing locally. And then there was a time in Leeds and then a time in London. So it was kind of a gradual move from the village to the city.
Wow. And was it I'm really curious. Did you study journalism or like, what did you study at that time?
I didn't study journalism. You kind of like the school system in the UK at the time, you did GCSEs when you're 16, kind of 14 to 16, you study for this like set of broad, like basically 10 different subjects for all the kind of classic basics. And then when you're 16, if you want to stay on, you have the option to kind of specialize in 3 subjects. So I kind of specialized in English literature, art, and sociology. And then I decided I was able to, with the grades that I got, get into university to study English literature and sociology at Leeds, which I really only went to because I heard that it was the clubbing capital of the North. That was I went with my dad to look around a couple of universities, and I was like, yeah, I'm in here. They got clubs.
Nice. And so at that time, were you like, do you remember what kind of like artist or DJ you were into?
So I'd kind of got a grounding in dance music through the television when I was a young teenager. There was a show called Top of the Pops, and because of where I was, the timing, the era that I was fortunate to grow up in, dance music really was like pop music in the UK then. The late 80s had obviously seen like the kind of rave scene really take off, like embracing a lot of the musics that were burgeoning in the States, and imported records coming over, and people having these like, you know, big huge parties in fields and stuff. I was too young for that. But by the time in like the early 90s, a lot of that music had started to cross over and become big chart hits. So some of it obviously got a bit watered down, but it was still my portal into it. And I think it was like artists like Baby D, Let Me Be Your Fantasy. That was huge. That was like a #1 hit when I was 15, I think. And Top of the Pops would play. Sometimes they'd have acts come on, and a lot of the time they'd be miming because that was the rule, and they'd have dancers dancing, and but sometimes they'd play the music video, and if it was a dance track there'd always be people dancing. So I would just be like enthralled to my TV set, seeing these people dancing and just having like the time of their life. And I was just like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to be near. So I started going out to a local club in my small town that would play all that kind of chart dance music. So that's what led me to go, okay, there's more of that in Leeds. And Leeds was very cool because at the time there was a bit of every kind of dance music scene. There was a big drum and bass thing. There was the West Indian Centre where you could go and hear like reggae and roots and all variety of like dub, etc. And then like Iration Sound Steppers, they're like digital dub. They were like, would do stuff there. And then there'd also be, there was techno nights, there was house nights, there was basically any kind of like electronic form of music. There was a little scene around it in Leeds. So I went to all of it. I went to the hard house nights, I went to the trance nights, I went to the house nights, I went to the techno nights, I went to the drum and bass nights. I just wanted to be part of everything.
Wow. And were you like, did you meet other people who were sharing the same interests at the time? Yeah,
I was very lucky. For the first year of university, you usually stay in halls. I'm sure it's like basically student accommodation. And I met a friend called Charlotte, and she quickly we recognized in each other that we want to go dancing. And so we just went to everything. We would be the first people queuing up outside the door. There was a night called Back to Basics, or just Basics, that had been going for a few years by the time we got there, and they would have people like Derek Carter, Satoshi Tomi, a bunch of like DJ Sneak, lots of people from New York, Chicago, Detroit would come and play. And my friends, actually, I was very lucky, a group of friends at university, they started a night and they were called Technique. And they were half in the techno world. So they would have people like DJ Rolando and Carl Craig, they would book to come and play. And then the other foot they had in the breaks world, like breakbeat was really happening around then. So they'd have like Stanton Morris or like Freak Nasty or Teo, people, like lots of so it was a real mix. It was fortnightly. So you kind of got a taste of everything in Leeds.
Nice. And were you like, so at that time, you like after a few years you graduated and you stayed at Leeds, right?
I did. I was basically I started getting into through going out dancing. I started really getting into the whole like world around it. So I was regularly buying dance music magazines, and at the time in the UK there were so many.
Yeah.
And my favorite was a dance music magazine called Jockey, Slut. And for anyone that might not be familiar, that name is kind of like a little tongue-in-cheek riff on anybody hanging around the DJ booth, the disc jockey booth, and like trying to see what the DJ was playing. So that was the kind of like tongue-in-cheek name. And basically that's honestly how I learned a lot about the music and the artists that I was listening to, because I would religiously buy it from HMV or whatever local record shop I could find it, and just read it from cover to cover. And we can do a little bit of show and tell.
Yeah.
I have a few. So they would have, and I've kind of like I've taken these everywhere with me. They would be like people like Green Velvet.
Nice.
And there'd be Daft Punk. Actually, I purchased this one for $2.95 from HMV.
Oh, is it fabric in the back? It says Fabric March. Like
oh yeah.
The club.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's the other cool thing is, going back and you can kind of see all the lineups. It's so fun.
Wow.
There's Peaches. And it was, I was basically, definitely my Bible. And I was really lucky that because I was going out to a lot of these club nights, and the big one was called Bugged Out, and it was over in Manchester, then also in Liverpool at Nation, where Cream was held, and it would be a huge party, and you'd see like, I saw Chemical Brothers there, I saw Dave Clark there, I saw Laurent Garnier there, and one of the founders of Bugged Out, John Burgess, who goes by Jono, he got to know him through a friend, and I was like, how could I get to like, basically have anything to do with Jockey Slut. Wow. And he was like, if you write a letter to Paul Mardles, who was the editor at the time, and put your case for why you would want to do some work experience, which is what we call an internship essentially. And I wrote my letter and I sent it off, and I don't think it got through. And so then I did an email via my Hotmail address, and Paul got back to me and was like, okay, come in for a month. And I stayed with a friend in London, and it was for this issue. I got to see how this issue, so it would have been sometime at the beginning, I think very beginning of 2002. And basically I got to like sit in the office with all these proper real music journalists and like see how they put this issue together. And they really let me fully understand how it worked, because they sent me out. This has got the streets on the cover. This is when original Pirate Material came out. and they let me go out for the cover interview, and I got to
Oh, you did the cover interview?
No. I didn't do that. I didn't do the cover, but I got to like just watch what was happening.
Oh, nice.
And I got to do this little my first kind of thing in print, which is where I went around and played all these kids on the streets. What did they think of the streets? So I did a little vox pops. So I basically, played them the music and then transcribed what they said, and it was my first little thing that I did, and it was just really amazing because I got to see for this cover shoot. There's obviously the photographer, there was the journalist, there was obviously Mike Skinner, and there was also the PR, and I kind of got to see them work together to make this thing happen, and then I got to have it, and I was like, wow. This is, why would I want to do anything else? Like, this is magic.
It's so inspiring because you said it was your Bible, and then you made it happen. You manifested your dream, like you saw.
Well, I mean, it was, I moved down to London in 2004 because I was like, okay, that's it. That's all I want to do is, is write about music and how can I work at a magazine. And, but again, because of the times that it was, the kind of like after the .com bubble burst and everything, the first time around, there was a real big knock-on effect to publishing, and a lot of magazines died. So Jockey, Slut ended up kind of folding in 2005, the same year that the Face also folded, and that was another magazine that I really enjoyed. And it meant that there wasn't really a solid foundation of like a dance music press. So because of that, I found myself in London with like, I need to get a job. So I worked in a sausage and mash shop. As a waitress, that's kind of how I supported myself at university. Is I'd always had a couple of jobs, worked in a shoe shop, worked in waitress, and all that kind of like whatever I could do to basically get by. And I did the same in London until I managed to find a copywriting job that basically they wanted. So like those Virgin Megastores, which was kind of like,
yeah, I remember.
Right. And so it was the kind of like the alternative to HMV. It was like the big box CD store and DVD, before, was it even DVDs?
Yeah.
Videos. Yeah. It was cassette videos. What are they even called? VCRs.
VCRs, yeah.
That's what it was. And they had advertised for somebody to like basically write the point of sale copy, like that would go next to the CD. And me being very naive, I thought that meant that I would get to listen to the music and then write about it. And I quickly discovered that no, you just had to basically repackage the press release in the kind of Virgin Megastores tone of voice. And that was my introduction to copywriting. And I was very lucky because that led to a job at the company that the agency as a copywriter, and then that basically carried me through most of the 2000s basically, because there wasn't, I did little bits of writing occasionally, but it really wasn't until 2009 that I like got back into writing about music. And that was because the people that started Jockey, Slut, which was Jono, again, John Burgess, and also Paul Benny. Paul and had decided with a business partner, they set up a website called Dummy, which was based off a magazine that had been running for a little bit called Dummy Magazine, and they turned it into a website. And they had a wonderful editor on board called Charlie Jones, and he kindly got me involved as writing about like new music in 2009. And again, this is unpaid, from the still up until, this age, I'm still not being paid for writing about music. It was just like, I knew I could make money as a copywriter, and then I could just like live out my dreams, listening to music, responding to it, being in dialogue with it in these kind of like blog spaces.
But so when you talked about copywriting, like what does it involve? Like what is it exactly?
Well, it's essentially like the dirty money job of like writing. It's there'll be a brand and they'll be like, we need to create a bunch of banner ads. I mean, banner ads for the time, like, so they'd be like, you know, that whether it's like a toothbrush company and they want to like have a snazzy couple of words that describe it. And so copywriting would be anything that any writing, any words that are helping to sell a product. And for me, I felt that if I could, I needed to find a way to make a living, but I needed a way to like, I could use my writing craft, but I also needed to kind of like keep almost my music writing pure in a way, in that like it was doing it from the beginning for free, and then started to make little bits of money, but it wasn't under the pressure of like having to be the way that I could pay my bills. And so I just felt lucky that I have a craft that I can use and do brand work, but it's separate from the thing that I actually care about.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it's the same with when you make music, when you're a musician, like you wanted to keep it pure. Like there's no way we can live from it, but then you see people living from it and you're like, what? Like,
no.
It's a paradox. But yeah, I'm really interested in like the time when you were working as an editor at Dummy. Like, what were your responsibilities and tasks?
Well, I was from the kind of pretty much from the beginning, I was like the next editor, which was, we had a section called Next and it was basically our new music, like what's next? Like it's a new music section. So I would be scouring through MySpace. It was still, MySpace was kind of like probably at its peak time, probably 2008, 2009 was like when a lot of people were like basically getting discovered on it and starting to break through. It was still very, obviously it'd been around for a few years, but it was like at peak popularity then. So I would be like, just, you know, often actually you'd look at gig posters or like flyers and you'd be like, wait, who's this support band? And then you would check the support band's MySpace and then you would see what bands they were into were in their top 8, and you would basically jump through the top eight of everybody's friends, and you'd be like, wait, I've just found new, and then I would like excitedly email Charlie and be like, you've got to hear this. I have to do an interview with them. Like these guys are amazing. We'd discuss it in meetings and basically to figure out our coverage and who we felt was like really doing cool new stuff. But it was, what was really cool about that time was like because the artists had this platform that still felt, even though it was a big, it was a corporation still, it had a very DIY feel, and they were able to kind of like do their own promo through this. And I remember like DMing artists I'm pretty sure I DM'd Rusty through MySpace. Like I would just like try and like set up things. I've definitely DM'd Shun Cody because I loved Shun's music, and you just like be like, hey, and just like, this song is so cool, and like you just reach out to people, and it was there was no middleman, there was no PR really. It was very democratic from a writer's side and an artist's side, because we were all, nobody was getting paid, but everybody was able to instantly connect with each other. So it felt very exciting. And at the time I still had a full-time job as a copywriter, so I was doing this in my evenings and weekends. And then over time I was able to negotiate going down to 4 days a week in my full-time job, and I would have 1 day a week in the Dummy office, and that was just like my happy place, because I could just sit with Charlie or Tamara, the rest of the team. There was a very small team, but people would come and go, and we'd just be like, okay, put this new one on for like, you know, oh my god, there's a new Joy Orbison, or like whatever like was happening, and we would all just be like, oh my god, Hype Williams just did this, and you'd be like, like listening and just freaking out, and it was really fun.
Do you think for you it was like a way, like being a dummy, it was a way for you to keep your, like, it would push you to like go out and seek new stuff, like be...
Definitely. It was just like a total thrill, because the artists that you were hearing and the shows that you were going to, I just got so much, because I was exposed to so much wider range of music. I came from like clubbing and being into like purely dance music, but a lot of at Dummy is where I kind of discovered my taste got weirder. Like I was like, the electronic music and the artists I was being exposed to were all pushing music in lots of different directions, and that was a huge education. Like because it was all so new and so thrilling, I was just constantly just like head blown. And because I had this kind of quite, normal day job, like that was pretty boring in comparison. Like I was living for my time at Dummy.
Wow.
And also we got to really experiment with the coverage that we were doing. So I got to do things like, can I be Perfume Genius's pen pal for like a couple of weeks, and then we'll just print our exchanges, and that'll be, I say print, publish on the website.
Yeah.
But also I got to, make a film on my phone with Rashad and Spin and DJ Manny when they came over in 2011.
Nice. Which I have a video that I can...
I mean, this from Chicago. We can't claim something that came before us. People have been doing this before us. We just took it to the next level, and we've been blessed enough to be the people that got the opportunity to take it to the next level and take it even further after that. Because now we got him, Manny, AG, even though they dance, they making tracks, they making music now. And like the dancing took off first, and then the music followed later.
So do you remember where was this?
So this was the reason why everyone came over. They were invited to take part in this breakdance convention called Breaking Convention, and essentially this is at Sadler's Wells, which is a huge dance performance space in London. And I just got a bit of time. I heard the Bangs and Works CDs through Planet Moo, and it's the first time I heard footwork music, and it blew my mind. It was so cool, and this is a great dancer, Light Bulb, still with We There in Chicago, still doing great stuff.
I mean, a lot of moves that have been created, they were created. It was already here. It was already here, but we just take it and make it to our own moves. And that also makes you that person or that different style.
Yeah, shout out to DJ Manny, he's in New York. I've seen him around.
So yeah, this was just something I shot on my phone to try and show like what, a little bit of, we didn't have resources, we didn't have video cameras, but I had my phone and I was able to just go, okay, I can grab some time with these guys nice. That are blowing me away. And like, what's a way to, as well as doing an interview and find about the work, why don't we get into the dancing side of it and like show how the music is in response to the dancing. So let the dancers lead. And that was like, so fun.
Nice. So yeah, I'm curious, why did you end up like interviewing Rashad and Manny and Spin?
Purely because that record, Bangs and Works, like hit me like a ton of bricks. It was the most exciting thing I think I'd heard for a very long time. And I think there was so much familiarity in it because obviously it's in a lineage with the musics that have come before in Chicago. There are those soul samples. There's a relationship to house in there, but then there's a relationship to hip hop through sampling, and then there's this insane, breakneck speeds. So there's this melancholy, and then there's all this just like urgency, and these two things together just captivated me. I wanted to move to the music, and as somebody who I don't make music, I dance to music, I try and write about it, but yeah, I really felt like Rashad was really special. I know we're coming up to 10 years since we lost him, and rest in peace forever. Really phenomenal. Yeah, and not seen a talent like him for a really long time.
Yeah, it's so true. I also feel like all the artists that you interview, it always come from this intuitive place. You have to connect with them first before you decide if you want to interview them or not. And I feel like your exchange are always so honest, so it makes me think of the music too. It's house music, how it started. It's always raw and honest. And I really feel it in the way you conduct interviews. And yeah, from after Dummy, so from 2014 to 2018, you joined the FADER in NYC. What led you to New York?
Well, I was super lucky. I kind of had just I think I left Dummy sometime basically end of 2013. No, I can't remember, something like that. And I was really lucky that actually FADER approached me in the beginning of 2014, and they had an open position. They just had a couple of key members, editorial staff, leave, and that was Matthew Schnipper and Naomi Zeichner had both left, and they had some openings. And for whatever reason, actually, well, I knew some of the writers, actually. I knew Sam Hockley-Smith and Emily Friedlander and Duncan Cooper through basically their writing. Dummy and FADER kind of were occasionally waving at each other across the sea. We would post FADER mixes that we thought were really cool, and they would occasionally give us a shout out. So there was that kind of bit of camaraderie. And I did Dummy for almost 5 years, and had started to write for other places like The Guardian Guide and Dazed and Confused, and had started to get some clippings together. And I never thought that I would ever actually have a job, but FADER approached me and said, "Hey, we've got this position," and I ended up getting the job originally as a deputy editor and then managing editor. And they basically sponsored my visa to come and move to New York. And yeah, I mean, it's unreal now when I think about it, because that's the only time I've ever had a full-time job in the media, in music media specifically. So I don't think it'll ever happen again, but it was a really special time.
It's so sad that when you think of music journalism, it's not it's such an important aspect of it's part of the music. How do you call it? We depend, ecosystem. We all depend on each other. And yeah, I'm curious about your opinion on the state. Right now, I feel all the music publications are disappearing. There's no funding. A lot of music journalists have to start their own newsletter. So yeah, what's your take on that?
I think we're kind of in free fall right now, and I think we all got so used to putting so much faith. I say faith loosely, but in platforms and corporations to have our best interests at heart, and they, of course, they don't. They're interested in profit. They're interested in, in their own, protecting their own biases and interests. And I think that we do need to go back to depending on each other and on ourselves. So I think that thinking about who you write for and why you write for them is really important right now. There aren't many outlets to write for if you're a music journalist. And I think a lot of people end up just, we're in a, it is the gig economy. You pitch in a lot of places and people just want to get their story placed. But I think we really need to be thinking about who we're writing for and what that writing is serving. That's something I've been thinking about over the last, I think in 2020, I intentionally stopped writing for a lot of places and started to think about like how if all these publications, if all these platforms, these newspapers, they don't take music journalism seriously, or they see it as a frivolous or just almost like a childish thing. I think it's not really taken seriously. And I think the only way to take it seriously as writers and musicians and dancers and filmmakers, if you really, really love something you take it seriously, you have to kind of like find your own space and make your own space to take it seriously. And if that means having a different kind of job in order to support the thing to protect the thing you really care about, that's the way that I've gone about it. I've basically done giving less of myself away, I guess, to places that I'm like, I'm not fully on board with the way that things are done here.
And sorry to go back to your time at the FADER. What were like the big takeaways from the experience?
Well, I mean, I definitely learned how to be an editor at the FADER. I really didn't know anything about editing. I mean, I knew how to commission stories and I knew how to correct grammar, but it was really my colleagues at the FADER, like Rawia Kamir and Anupa Mistry, Naomi Zeichner, Duncan Cooper, Matt Trammell, loads of people, basically, who taught me how to write and edit. Like I knew how to write, but I didn't really know how to do a big story. I was like honestly coming from a blogging perspective at Dummy. We did lots of experimentation, and shout out Charlie Jones again, because he really believed in me enough to give me a break. But we were like, fast and furious at Dummy. We were like, get something up, and like I'm just gonna write this stuff from the heart. And we were like checking each other's work, but it wasn't at FADER. There was a really rigorous editing. There was a magazine that we created, and there was also a website. And you would have several editors on a story. You'd have rounds of fact checking. You'd have rounds of proofreading, and we were really thinking about like the politics of writing, like why are we writing something? Who is the audience? What do we say? I always remember when Rawia put in the comments, like, who do you mean when you say we? It was like, we're really thinking about like writing in a much more intentional, thoughtful way. So I credit all of my colleagues at FADER for like teaching me to be a better listener, a better writer, and a better editor, and to really think about like why we were engaging with something in the first place.
Yeah, I've been diving into your how would you call it, archive? Like I wanted to say discography. Maybe it's a discography. I don't know. But in 2015, you interviewed Ryuichi Sakamoto. That's like a dream. How was it?
That was incredible. I actually got to interview him twice, once in 2015 and 2017. Definitely the artist actually I've probably written about the most, because after interviewing I ended up reviewing his music, also writing about his film work, writing about his installation work. He's somebody that again, another great that we have lost. It's just been a year since he passed away. But yeah, it was so cool. What was really cool was that the reason, the kind of hook for getting to interview him was the fact that he'd composed the score for The Revenant.
Yeah.
And while that score was cool and all, like, I just really wanted to talk to him about other stuff. Like, he was so funny. And I lucked out in that he'd done an interview the day before in a cafe, but it turned out to be really loud. So they changed the location to his actual studio. Whoa. So it was like the basement beneath his house, I think. And it was just like being let into his like private space. And he was recovering, a year or two into his first recovery period from his first bout of cancer. So he was quite, he was quite frail, but he was really with it, and just endlessly curious, like that, like a true artist, if that's not a cliche to say, in that like he worked in so many different forms. He always was just fueled by his own interest in something, his own curiosity in something. Like, that's not entirely true. I'm sure, we're all shaped by the listeners in our lives, and their listening shapes our listening. And I'm sure that his family members and his creative partners all shaping him as well. But he was just so receptive to all of it.
Wow.
So it was just so exciting and he was also, environmentalist. He had all these other interests. So all of that stuff folded into everything, and it meant that you could just have these really fun, wide-ranging conversations. And I could tell that he was also, just really open to being asked anything. So it was a thrill.
Nice. Yeah, you've also interviewed Jonas Mikas, he's such a legend.
Right.
Wow.
I know. That was so cool, because he was, this was about a year again. Why did people keep on dying?
Yeah.
This is about a year before he died, and he was very old. He was like 90 or coming up to 90, but he was still living by himself. I went to his apartment, which was essentially, his apartment was an archive, and it was in New York, and it was like a library. Like, you went in and it was just like rows of shelves, and his cat wandering around and just all of his archive materials. And again, just like the sweetest soul. Yeah, he was like just really somebody that was still interested to the very end. He was talking about contemporary films that he was watching. Like, he'd just seen, I haven't actually seen it, but he'd just seen Lady Bird by Greta Gerwig, and he was like enthusing about this, and he'd actually just recently discovered, or not recently discovered, but recently got into reading Virginia Woolf. And he was just like and he'd found all these early medieval texts that he'd found in the street, like a free book giveaway or something else. He was just like, he's been reading that. He was just interested, devouring everything that he get his hands on, and just curious to the very end. So again, who wouldn't want to have a chat with somebody like that? And Walden, like the kind of work that he kind of made when he was like in the kind of 50s, I guess, in the 60s, was it 50s? This very abstract films, like, the avant-garde cinema, like basically impressionistic in so many ways. Like, you're just getting a sense of the feeling of what it like meant to be hanging out with his friends, or to be in the park, or to like you know, it was watching those films is so musical. It's like visual music in a way. So there was a through line for me. I'm not like a scholar of avant-garde cinema, and I'm not or of paintings or visual art or anything, or of music, but like I've always tried to, if something excites me and I want to like be in dialogue with it, I've tried to like navigate towards it, and I've been lucky that I've had opportunities to do so.
Nice. So were you, like you mentioned, during your time at Demi, you were finding artists through MySpace. During the time at the FADER, how were you finding artists?
Wow. Well, that was, I mean, a lot of it was from going to gigs, going to clubs. You'd go to local clubs, and like the local club, Bossa Nova Civic Club, which I think we're both very familiar with. That was obviously in Bushwick, and I know you had John on recently. So shout out John.
Shout out to John.
But we, you know, I was there pretty much every weekend, and that's how I got to, you know a lot of the artists that I would end up then becoming. Well, I say got to know. I got to know the work of the artists that I would end up then be like, hey, could you do a fader mix? Because I'd be like, this is what's the coolest set I've ever seen. So it'd be like going out and seeing people. But also, obviously, when you're at a publication, as I learnt, you're getting a billion emails. So sometimes artists would email and be like, hey, listen to my music, and you would check that out, and, you know, occasionally there'd be like a real connect, and you'd also get a lot of PR emails, and that would be, I have like an itchy relationship with PR, and that like it's, I was always frustrated that, you know, in most cases an artist wasn't getting paid and a writer wasn't getting paid, but PRs always certainly got paid. And I know there are some wonderful PRs out there, but as a middleman thing, it was frustrating to me that somebody else is always making the money rather than the artist or the writer.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, it's so weird because I feel like it's like a free, like it's like a how you, like, you know, the cowboy, like that, like it's like the Wild West,
right?
Like the music industry is just like a, like there are structures, but then some people, like it's hard to like pinpoint. It feels like everyone is just doing whatever they want, and it's a mess. But yeah, I'm wondering, like when you were working at the FADER, like what was your like process? Like let's say you went to Bassa and you found this artist. Like what's the process of like your like writing, or like would people at the FADER be? Were you the one who like decide who will be featured? Or?
Well, as I was like the managing editor, so I was doing a lot of organization. So it would be like I would be making sure all freelancers get paid for the website. So I was running all like the invoices and getting everything to accounts, and like trying to be like a good orderly system. And I was also running the internship program and like interviewing students. It was only open to if you were already a student somewhere, so it was like part of a, you know, credit system. It'd be because it wasn't a paid internship program, so it was like they were doing it through university. And I was also kind of being like the had oversight of the website. So generally, like I could be making I'd be like, oh, we definitely want them for a fader mix. So I was like, you know, for a while, until like a bit later down the line, Nazak, shout out Nazak, took over fader mixes, and she did an amazing job. But yeah, I was kind of like, oh, let's just, I was like, we should do this for that. And we were planning out I was planning out like the coverage, like, okay, well, next week we're going to have this. So we were planning everything a few weeks in advance and trying to like get everything in, and like knowing that we also needed to get blogs up, etc. But then there's also part of the editorial team are really focused almost exclusively on the magazine. Mm-hmm. And so for that, I would be pitching stories to editor at the time was Naomi, and then it was Duncan, and being like, hey, I love so and so, and so actually I have a couple of issues of FADER here, and one of the actually my one cover story that I did for FADER was with Sampha.
Oh,
so
nice.
That was back. This was 2016. Yeah. So this was when his first album came out, and was really beautiful. And this was an artist that I knew from back home. I knew from London. So I already had a friendly rapport with him because we'd see each other at shows. I remember a very early Boiler Room with James Blake, and I guess it was like maybe it was 2011 or something like that. I remember like James's album first album it got leaked. Oh. And it leaked because the PR had uploaded it to SendSpace, and he'd called it James Blake album, and somebody found it, and it got leaked. But it was a big like, oh, who leaked it? And then it was like, oh, it was the PR by accident. Damn. Because he'd just made it for journalists to be able to download and review it, etc. But anyway, I remember like that was the context for going to see James. We were like, everyone was like talking about, oh my god, the James. But I remember Sampha being there, and I was like, oh, what are you up to? Because I knew his Sundanza EP, and he'd originally been making lots of instrumental music, and it was really cool. And I was like, yeah, what have you been up to? And he was like, he's always been a little shy, and he was like telling me, and he was like, oh, I've started to do some singing. And I was like, oh, and then in my head I was like, oh, all these producers could be doing their singing, I was like, oh, and then obviously turned out to be the best singer ever, and like the most beautiful music. So I I've loved his ear and his mind as a music maker and producer for a long time, and then fell in love with his songwriting and his voice. So it was really fun to, like, having lived in America for a couple of years, to then get to go back to London and spend some time, a few days with him in London, and get to hear his remarkable story about learning to become the artist that he is.
Wow. So it's like, in a way, you've seen like artists evolve, like, and you mentioned friendship with so many people that, like, it's so amazing, like, to think about, like, I don't know how to say what I want to say, but you've seen like shifts, you've seen things evolve throughout the years, and are you still like interested in music? Like, is it still something going on in your life?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that's a forever thing. I mean, I was very lucky that London at that time was so fertile. There was so much stuff going on. You had Mika Levi doing Mikachu, and then also working with Quez, and they were doing Quezitude together, and like they were doing so much cool stuff. There was so many artists, and there was obviously all Night Slugs was happening, and then Night Slugs had that relationship with Fader Mind. So you had like, Fatima Al-Qadiri and like Iconica, like, remixing each other. And then, there was so much transatlantic and across Europe, like collaboration, and then I mentioned Hype Williams earlier, but there was just so many people like doing whatever they wanted. And this was artistically, and this was just in that period before Spotify had really reached its peak. It wasn't the default listening space, because I think that was 2011, I think that was right. So there was this period where it wasn't fully taken up. Like you went to MySpace, sure, and listened to the tracks. I mean, that's how I first heard Light Asylum, another favorite act of mine. But like, we're always over the way that technology has impacted our lives in so many ways, but the way that you access music has shifted. And I feel like I have reverted back a little bit. Like I don't have a streaming platform. I have streaming for TV things. I watch the usual streaming platforms for TV, but for music, I still like going to gigs. I saw Eric Copeland play recently. It was phenomenal, like blew my mind. Like played lots of new music. Like I don't even know how to describe it, which is why I'm so excited. I'm like, Logan my partner has a couple of clips on his phone, and I'm like, send me those clips so I can just listen to these bits and just trying to figure out like, what this music is, or what I feel about it. Because at the time it blew me away. Like I was talking to a friend afterwards and we were both like, this was the best gig I've ever seen. No, like, oh my God, when that happened, and just, you're just like, it's really shakes you. And, going to, I think I remember seeing you at Dweller a year or so ago. No, I didn't make it this year, unfortunately, but going to see who did we see? Who was playing at the time?
Underground
Resistance. It was Mark Flash, from Underground Resistance. And then there was also Stacey Hot Wax. Afterwards.
That was so good.
It's beautiful, like literally being in physical spaces and listening to music through the ears and experiences of the DJs and their connection to the music that they want to share with you as the audience. But also records, like we have like a crappy little record player, and I have an old, amp and speakers from the 70s that my mum and dad used to keep in the shed. And so there's this stuff that I had shipped over when I first moved here, and whether I order an album off Bandcamp and sometimes get the LP and then like play that, like I've kind of gone from MySpace, I've kind of come to records, because it is a nice way to kind of listen together and share. Logan will put a record on and then I'll put a record on, and can listen together.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because I feel like now everything is collapsing. Even Bandcamp, Spotify, everything is like, and people, I think it's like a common, I've had the discussion with other friends in music, and everyone kind of like want to go back to how it was like prior, like like even having a magazine is such a important, just for archive purposes. Like you can have this object, and with internet we don't know, we have the internet archive, but it's really hard to like keep track of all the work that you've done, writing for like publications online.
I mean, none of these platforms are our friends. None of these corporations are our friends. And I think I've been most inspired by writers like making zines again, and like, making physical objects. Huasu made a little zine called Listening to Music with Your Friends that was kind of related to his book that he wrote, Stay True, and he invited lots of music writers and his friends to write a little something for it, and I did a little bit of that, and I was like, oh yeah, you can just photocopy some pages, you can and you can put it together, and then that's something that we can all keep, because I know that the internet, I don't know, I feel like the internet won't be around forever, and certainly these platforms won't be. And so yes, PDF, the articles that you want to keep, and then when you have access to a printer, print them off. I mean, no, the trees, got to think about the trees. Okay, but PDF them, put them on a hard drive, and then get another hard drive and back that up. And because it won't all be there. And I keep thinking about what the role of music journalism is, or the role of music. And I think role is a stupid and insufficient word, because we know what we each individually feel when we're in the arms of a piece of music that moves us or makes us feel some type of way. So if you are a writer, you may want to have a dialogue with that piece of writing. And so write it down. Like that bit of writing is going to connect you again to that feeling. And part of being a human being is trying to join the dots between why and how you feel the things that you feel. And memory is something that is jolted by this recontact with something. And I think that's why I do it. It makes you feel alive, and it reminds you of who you were and who you might be in the future. So I think that's why it's important. But if it is important, I think then you have to decide to do it for yourself. I mean, it is maybe a new era of DIY, but and think about not being paid for it. I know that's terrible. Yes, I do also agree that there should be a living wage for musicians, and I do think that's awesome that that's being pursued as a route. You know, right now there's the bill out there, and that's awesome. And I do think that writers should be paid, but I also think that writing and music are crafts that, like, you have to, well, you don't have to do anything, but if you want to, do it for yourself, do it for the music, do it for the art, do it to have to remind your future self of this moment. And then maybe that will grow into something else.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so beautifully said. And I would love to ask you like how do you see writing intersecting with activism in general? Because you've mentioned the New York war crimes.
Yeah, I think that. I think as I was kind of hinting at earlier, I think thinking about who you write for is really important. Obviously, right now we're now in the 7th month of Israel's genocidal campaign against the people of Gaza. And I think that one of the ways that I've been thinking about how you can have a say or an impact is by not writing or contributing or subscribing to publications that are actively enabling the US support of, and not even support of, funding of this horror and atrocity. And the New York Times is arguably one of the biggest culprits in propping up the US sponsorship of this genocide. And the New York War Crimes is a great physical publication, but also an online resource created by the Writers Against the War on Gaza. And I think they have some awesome new writing and some historical writing that helps to give a bit of context about the ways in which the New York Times is complicit, not just with this particular horrificness, but also with other conflicts around the world, and also right here in America, the way that the New York Times consistently prints press release information from the New York police department, NYPD, and in the same way that they're doing with the Israeli occupation press points. And I feel like while arts and culture journalism isn't quote unquote hard journalism, it still has a role to play. And I think that arts and culture journalists, music journalists should think about whether they want to be contributing to a publication that is so actively involved in this genocide. So I would really urge people to check out the New York war crimes and the Writers Against the War on Gaza for more information on that. But there was a great Nikki Mao from Hero Cone had tweeted about the importance of refusal in these times, and I really took that to heart. And it's been something I've been thinking about for the last couple of years about we get pushed as writers and musicians and artists and designers to like the options available to us to get our work out there, or get smaller and smaller. So sometimes we're like, well, if I can put my work there, then that's still for the greater good, and etc. But like, is it for the greater good? Do you want to be associated with that? Do you want your writing and energy and passion to be sharing space with that kind of energy? So I would, urge people to think about refusal as one of the small but important ways that we can respond in this moment.
Yeah. You're writing a non-fiction book, Signals from Beyond. Can you tell us more about it?
Oh yeah, I'm still writing it. It's been I've written a couple of chapters, and I was really lucky that I've worked with lots of great editors over the years. And I have to shout out Jacob Gans at NPR because I did a column for them a few years ago, and that helped me think about listening deeply. And so that's what led to me wanting to write about this book and wanting to basically explore my relationship to electronic music throughout my life. Like, why has electronic music held so much more appeal to me, and like than any other form of music? And it's not to say that, acoustic forms or orchestral forms of music have no interest to me, because that's not true. But like the electrified sound in all its crazy different forms, electronic forms of music, really excite me like no other form. So the book is essentially a chance to like figure that out in conversation with the artists, many of the artists that I have been so impacted by. I don't have an agent, I don't have a book deal, so I'm very much in the process of like starting to pitch that again. I had a baby, and so that like I've had a little bit of a time off from it, but now I'm returning to it and rereading things that I've written and gone, that's terrible, I need to have more clarity, and it's helping me. I've just rewritten the book proposal with the help of a wonderful editor called Naomi Huffman, and I have to like just keep doing it. Nice. and keep on keeping on. But it's I'm back in the saddle.
Nice. And like, do you think that motherhood changed the way you listen to music or the way you write?
I think so. I think we're all always changing. I think that's like definitely. I think that Octavia Butler's really right, that change is the only constant. Like, God is change. And so I think that if we do engage in listening and actively and reading and thinking and etc., we're always becoming. And I don't know, it's so interesting to see what sounds that Kai, like, he's like just turned 13 months, what he responds to, he does like kick drums, he does like you know, beats, he like will bounce up and down, and then, you know, when a train goes over the tracks above the playground that we go to often, he'll also bounce up and down his knees. He's like really like, you know, rhythm is like important to him, but he also really he likes interesting voices when he hears, like, you know, there's so many things that he responds to that it's just really cool to listen with him. And a record that we've been listening to a lot recently is the Julius Eastman Feminine record, which is a live recording of a performance from 1974. And it's a record that a friend gave me, Rawi gave me. Shout out Rawi, because I've been listening to that a lot and thinking about lots of things recently. But listening with a baby is really cool. Highly recommend. Because you do, it kind of, it holds you, it shapes the space around you, and you do listen in a different way.
Nice. Well, any other projects or things you're excited about, or what's next?
Well, I don't know. I just had a really fun. My friend Rod started a journal called Offal, which is kind of like for offcuts of writing, and I gave a little just fiction story, a little sci-fi fiction story.
Oh, nice.
To him, and that was really cool. And then I found out also that a bit of a couple of years ago, I worked with actress on a libretto for his opera that he did, and part of that's in here as well.
Oh,
so
nice.
And I hadn't actually seen it since then, and I was like, oh, cool. So I was reading that, but that was fun. I kind of, and again, this is something, you know, you're not getting paid to do, but like contributing to projects and something gets made is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been enjoying that. But yeah, I'm listening, trying to write again, figuring it out, like everybody.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Ruth. It was a pleasure. And yeah, I'll make sure to include all of the links, and also like updates with, you know, like your project, your book and everything. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really lovely. Thank you.
And hopefully we'll see you, like, I'm sure I'll see you around in shows.
We'll be dancing. And just like, congrats on this space that you're creating and this whole beautiful archive that you're creating, because this is a moment in time that you're capturing with lots of different creatives around New York, and so it's really cool.
Thank you. Bye.